quoting Shakespeare, to vax, or paraphrasing Shakespeare, to vax or not to vax? That's the question. And why is outdoor dining going away in LA the breaking point for a lot of liberals? Police in Los Angeles, what if you had to have a bachelor's degree? Would you shoot fewer people? And finally, why the heck is Matthew McConaughey canceled? It's Rob Nelson Live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Rob Nelson Live Wednesday night rant and interactive convo show. Love all your feedback, engagement, Twitter, Periscope, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and, of course, Reddit. And love our Reddit fans out there. All right, you guys, jump in with me on this. We're going to wind it up. We're going to keep it short and simple. I want all your feedback, all your comments. I'm here in Florida, freezing my butt off. It's like 30 degrees. You'd think it's a sunshine state, but hey, right now it's the freezing cold state. But I love it. T-shirt as usual, and let's get right into it. Do you get the injection or don't you? To vax or not to vax? That's the big question for people now, right? And it's going to become the big question, right? Do you get the vaccine? Don't you get the vaccine? So many people are saying, I won't get the vaccine for all kinds of reasons. And others are saying you have to get the vaccine. And some people are saying you should make people get the vaccine. That ain't going to happen. They're not going to be like, you have to get the vaccine. I mean, they're just not. They're just not going to order that. But you never know. Crazy times, COVID times. Why wouldn't you get the vaccine? Well, some people just don't like getting vaccines. Plain and simple. I didn't have a vaccine in my body till I was 22. I didn't have anything in my body till I was 22. So, thanks, Monkey Arms. Appreciate it. I like the shout out. I'm getting some positive because I know I'm going to get a lot of shade on me before the night is through. Come on, I'm already in the dark, guys. No need to shade me anymore. No, please shade me on. Praise baby Jesus Santa, says Tyler. Tyler Boylan, stick with me, my friend, because Tyler shot me an idea and I'm taking it. I'm going with it on police reform in LA. We're going to jump into that in a minute. Back to the vaccination. Why wouldn't you get it? Why would you get it? Why wouldn't you get it? Some people don't like getting things shot at them. Like I said, never had anything in me till I was 21. Not because I didn't want it, because I was raised in a family and a religion where we didn't do that. We didn't have medicine. So, I got vaccinated up like crazy when I could. Shoot me up, baby. Like, I haven't had a flu shot in 20 years. I don't know. I just don't have it. Would I get the vaccine? It's a great question. I mean, why don't some people want to get it? Well, again, some people just don't like putting things in their body. Some people are convinced vaccinations are bad for you. That it gives kids autism, that whole thing. I ain't going down the whole vaxxer, anti-vaxxer thing. I hate the fact that you can't have an argument against vaccinations without being canceled. Like, if you say that, you're like cuckoo, like you think the world is flat. There's a legit debate about vaccinating kids and what it does to them. It's a legit debate, science on both sides. But this is different. This isn't so much a bunch of adults worrying about whether or not they're all going to, you're going to go autistic or something if you get a vaccination. This is about people being scared. They don't know what the disease, they don't know what the vaccination might do to you. I mean, we rushed this puppy through, right? I mean, thank God. But I mean, they created this vaccine in record. It takes, 5, 6, it can take 10 years. I mean, they just pop this thing out, It was like a speed baby. And, like in the Alien movie, you're going to get somebody pregnant, suddenly they have a baby just like that. But, the truth is they don't know exactly what'll happen. They're not 100% sure. So people are like, I don't know. Like, obviously, if you're a real vulnerable population, you might be like, I'll take my shot. I don't care. I'll take a shot at it. Give me the vaccine. Rather be safe. It's a better option for me. It's like these kids. I made a movie, a documentary. If you're into a cool doc, you should check it out. It's called Magnificent Burden. You can get it on Amazon Prime. And it's about, it's a story. It's a really cool story, actually, about a woman who goes undercover to bring down a human trafficking ring, goes undercover with the FBI, has a kid that was through that ring, and it turns out he has a deadly disease called spinal muscular atrophy. She goes on a mission to save his life. It's an incurable disease at the time of the movie a few years ago. And in the process, we get into the whole process. We meet with the FDA. I watch the whole approval process. We meet with members of Congress for the documentary, and they're trying to get this drug rushed through on a fast track, as the FDA called it. And that was like 5 years. So they did this in a year. Well, not even 9 months. I mean, that's beyond fast track. But one of the challenges when they're testing a vaccine is you go through all these levels of trials. You start, before you even get to humans. This kid in the movie is one of the first kids to get in the human trials for this vaccine, for this disease, spinal muscular atrophy. And it's a big risk. They even say these kids are guinea pigs. We don't know what's going to do to them when they get it. But why would you put your kid in that situation? Well, because your kid has a deadly incurable disease that at a minimum is going to turn your child. It's almost like ALS in kids. Literally, they can't produce protein, so they can't form any muscles. So the bigger they get, the weaker they get. And they literally become crippled, weaker and weaker, and then die because they ultimately can't breathe. So if your kid is facing that, why wouldn't you try the vaccine? I mean, it's like their future isn't bright. Like, this is a shot. And that's what people in the documentary argued. They're like, give us the vaccine, make it emergency use. We'll take it. Our kids are suffering and most likely dying. We'll take a shot. If it doesn't work, well, the alternative wasn't so great either. That's why, but again, the guinea pig aspect, kids trying it. We've guinea pig people through, whether it's the Pfizer vaccine or any other vaccine, we've guinea pigged them through. And now people are like, well, do I want to be the next round of the first human trials? So if you're really sick, if you're really vulnerable, if you're like, if I get COVID, I'm done, you might be like, I don't care, I'll take a shot. But there's a lot of people who are like, you know what? If I get COVID, I'm probably okay. I mean, I won't be the best 2 weeks of my life, but I'll probably be fine. So maybe I don't want the vaccine. Maybe I'd rather just not take a risk that there's something weird in it that they would have found out in another 6 or 8 months or 2 years of trials that they didn't find out. So I don't know that I want to take it. That's not a crazy person argument. That's a healthy person going, I don't know. I don't generally get vaccinated anyway. And I don't know if I want to take a vaccine that might have side effects. Probably does, because they just haven't had enough time to test. And I'm not in a position where, hey, the alternative is so far worse. The alternative is like, I think I'm probably okay. On the other side, people are like, yeah, but you might get other people sick who are vulnerable. There's an argument to be made on both sides. But at the end of the day, you could argue, if you're really worried, get the vaccine. And whoever doesn't want to get it, well, you might get sick. But you're not going to get anybody sick who's been vaccinated. But still, there's a lot of people saying, I don't want to. I'm scared. I don't want to. And it's become political, like everything in this country now, where it's like somehow if you have a legitimate argument why you might not want to get vaccinated, you're somehow kooky. You're not kooky. I'm not a person who would think you should just be scared of all vaccinations, but there's people who just don't like putting stuff in their body. And, monkey arms is much worse in well, I still don't know if you're a woman or a man, but I'm guessing you're a woman. So monkey arms, the he, she, or gender neutral pronoun. I'm gonna go with the she for now until you tell me otherwise. Put worse things. Yeah. So I'm guessing that's like, so I haven't put worse things in my veins. And it doesn't mean I wouldn't get the vaccine. Part of me would get it just so I could say, now you don't have to worry. Not about me getting it. No one has to worry about being around me because I'm vaccinated. Because I tend to be out a lot and I'm not hidden down. And so for me, part of it's not wanting other people to be uncomfortable. But it's a fair question. Would you or would you not get the vaccine? And again, I don't think you should argue that it's you're wrong to go either way. So Tyler, 1 in 10 years, chances of getting the flus. Yeah. So, Tyler makes a good point. And Tyler, thanks representing on the left. Appreciate you, man. I do. I think that's a valid argument that that the reason the flu is so low, obviously, is because we have vaccinations, and we still get 60,000 flu deaths in a bad year. I mean, the flu mutates and all that, but vaccinations have kept it down. This is a more contagious disease than the flu, or at least it's certainly more contagious because we don't have a vaccine. I mean, they know it's a highly infectious disease, period, and the lack of a vaccine has made it, appear more so than a normal respiratory virus. But that said, And I'm not arguing against vaccinations. I am arguing that we should not be telling people who go, I'm not sure I want to, you're crazy. I don't like this "you're crazy" argument when somebody goes, maybe I don't want to take that risk on my body. There could be side effects. There probably will be. They just aren't sure yet. And as I just said, I did a whole documentary where we looked into that. And tell you what, these kids weren't getting a shot in the arm. These kids with this disease, they were getting, it was an epidural in the back. I mean, we have it on film. Like the kids screamed. It hurt. It was painful to watch. Why would you put your kid through that? Because your kid was going to most likely die. There's a lot of people who are like, I am not most likely going to die. I think I'm most likely going to be okay. So I might not want to take that risk. It's not crazy. At the same time, there's a social argument that if enough people get vaccinated, we reduce the spread of this disease. And that's a huge win for everybody. So I think it's fair to look at both sides before we go. Electro Wiz 23, 123. I would rather have a slight effect from the vaccine than get COVID. Fair enough. And we've been going through this forever, and most of all signs say that it's safe. Well, again, I just want to say, I'm not disagreeing with you. When you say most scientists say it's safe, I'm going to, go again with my own personal experience making a movie in which I sat with top people at the FDA. We sat with congressional leaders, who were trying to pass legislation. It's essentially to create what they called an emergency use authorization for a drug that the FDA had not yet approved. It would allow you to sign a waiver and say, I'll take my chances with the drug. I will not hold the government or the pharmaceutical company responsible if I get it. Something bad happens. I'm waiving that so I can get the vaccine for my kid, and my kid can live. So all I'm going to say here is when you say most people say it's safe, and I'm going to be really clear here. I am not an anti-vax person, and I'm certainly not saying you shouldn't get it. I'm saying they say it's safe to the degree they know. They've rushed it through. And if you were to sit down honestly with pharmaceutical execs at Pfizer or anywhere else, they would tell you, yeah, we think it's pretty safe. We ran it through as many trials as we could in a hurry. But they can't say we are sure there aren't longer term side effects. We haven't had a chance to test long enough. We haven't had a chance to see what happens. So you might be right that you get a little discomfort and that's better than COVID. But there are people who could argue, I don't want to take that risk because I think I'll be okay with COVID. And I don't know what might be with the vaccine. I mean, already, they found a couple people in England and they said, if you have a high risk of allergy, you probably shouldn't take it. Now I'm going, well, does that mean? I mean, I'm allergic to stuff. I'm allergic to, to pets and grass, all kinds of stuff. Or do they mean if you get the toxic shock syndrome, like you eat a peanut and you drop? But, they've already said we need to be careful with people who have, are highly affected by, have allergic reactions. So they're going to discover that stuff. Just want to say it's a fair argument. And Electro Wiz 123, I would say once most people are vaccinated, this virus can finally be over with. Yes and no. I mean, yes, to some extent. But first of all, you're going to have a big chunk of the country that's not getting vaccinated. Just accept that. I mean, too many people are going to be hesitant. And that's not anything to do with what I'm saying or what anybody else is saying. Nobody needs to say anything to them. They've already made their minds up about that. I bet 30% at least of the country says I won't get it, possibly more. Now, again, once you've vaccinated a lot of the vulnerable population, you make that a whole lot better because at least then you can argue, stop saying you can't go out because, you're going to infect somebody who's vulnerable. They're protected. You want to infect yourself? Go for it, And I kind of feel that way. If you're not going to hurt anybody else, go ahead and hurt yourself if you want. But I don't know that it's over, guys, because in a weird way, this vaccine's gotten in our heads. It's almost like COVID is a social virus. It's not just a disease. It's not just a physiological disease. It's become a social virus. It's infected the way, and I don't mean literally infected our brains, but it's sort of like had the effect because of how it shut us all down. It's literally created a climate in this country of, I've called it the two Americas. It's ripped us apart. It's divided us, culturally. It's divided us economically, the haves and the have-nots. It's put us in two camps of those who believe I should be able to do what I want, don't tell me what to do, and others who say, do what you're told. It's for the good of everyone. Well, let's switch gears for a second to the good of everyone. For the good of everyone. They've been telling you that for a while. Stay home for the good of everyone. You all know my view on lockdowns. I'm not against doing what's for the good of everyone. I am not remotely convinced that massive lockdowns work. And before you jump all over me, there are plenty of scientists, there are plenty of epidemiologists, there are plenty of data out there. There's plenty of data out there that suggests that lockdowns perhaps don't work. They're not 100% sure why. There's lots of theories why they don't appear to be effective, but they certainly don't appear to be working very well. And the data shows that, and in the fact that certain places that are locked down have huge breakouts, and certain places that aren't locked down don't have significantly worse. That's not to say wise practices don't work. That's not to say social distancing, masking, and a vaccine would not work. It's to say the notion that that we need to all stay home to protect the vulnerable is a valid argument. The problem is they've extended it to the point that the you need to sacrifice, do the right thing mentality has hit a wall for a lot of people. In Los Angeles, oddly, that wall appears to be outdoor dining. I mean, people were fine locking down. Stay home, get my paycheck, get my unemployment. I'm good. I'll do whatever, go to the grocery store. I've always said it's a little annoying because, again, the people who were most comfortable being locked down were the people who could either afford to be locked down, or if they were getting some kind of government assistance, were happy to stay home. It wasn't literally, it may have been impinging on their life, but it wasn't like they were at great risk. Like, I'm not going to be able to pay my rent. I'm going to lose my business. I've got kids. I can't manage this. I can't afford healthcare. I need to go to whatever it would be. And I always thought it's interesting that we're all fine staying home, but let the essential workers, as we called them, go out. Let the people run the grocery stores and the liquor stores and the pot dispensary, and the gas stations. They're all good. They're American heroes. It's a little like, right, you guys go take the heat, And it was, I always said, the minute you said people can't go do the things they want and need to do to be able to stay home comfortably, because you got Netflix and Amazon Prime and, lots you can do at home. The minute you take that away, people are going to get fed up. Well, it didn't quite come to that. What it came to was no more outdoor dining. And a whole lot of people were like, wait a minute, you've just gone too far. Why was it outdoor dining? What was it about outdoor dining that people were like, that's the last straw? And I'm talking about a lot of liberals. Like, that's it. That is the final straw. You have taken my outdoor dining away, and I am pissed. I want to be able to eat outdoors. Now, let's forget about the fact that this whole thing always becomes the science, as we call it, the science. I really hate that word, the science, the gospel. If you're a person who gets anxious when people say the gospel, like it's in the Bible, you should get anxious when people say the science, as it's the science. Like, there's one thing. I've said this before. Science is not one specific thing. It's a study, right? It's a way of thinking, a way of examining, exploring, deducing information. And it's a scientific process in which you take data, come up with conclusions, have hypotheses. Science isn't one outcome. There's lots of different data that can lead to lots of different conclusions, which is why in science, you have the very famous example of science of Albert Einstein, who created the theory of relativity, right? And, that whole notion that, essentially, if you go fast enough, time stops. Time is a variable. It's not fixed like we used to think. And that was a radical breakthrough, the theory of relativity. Time is not fixed. Well, he ran up against Niels Bohr, the quantum physicist. And if you know a lot about physics, I mean, you want to go crazy mind, quantum physics suggests scientifically, the science would suggest there's probably multiple universes, parallel universes. The science of quantum physics would be that if you run at a brick wall enough times, one of those times, it might take 20 billion, your body should pass right through it. Because the way the molecule structure is just a random thing, mostly space, mostly negative space, you go right on through. I don't think you want to try that. You go throw you at that wall at 50 miles an hour, you have a whole lot of dead people. But in quantum physics, theoretically, and therefore the science, you would eventually pass through. Well, quantum physics turned a lot of traditional physics on its head, including relativity. And there's a famous moment where Niels Bohr is describing this notion around some notions around quantum physics and how it sort of disorders the structure that Einstein had. And Einstein said, God doesn't play dice with the universe, because quantum physics essentially is almost like playing dice with the universe. And Niels Bohr says, stop telling God what to do. My point is, these are two brilliant, completely esteemed scientists, geniuses, one relativity theory, one quantum physics. And yet they had very different views of the science. So science isn't one thing. And you can have different views of what you think. But when we go back to the science, there's no science that anyone is showing that outdoor dining spreads COVID more than anything else. I mean, you could argue everything could spread COVID, but there's no real scientific data. The numbers show that the spread related from that they can trace from outdoor dining is minimal. So people understandably were fed up, but the hypocrisy of shutting down restaurants for outdoor dining for a lot of people was like the final straw. When you saw people like, when you actually saw people out there, like having their restaurants closed down when people across the street had their restaurants open. The owner, Amanda Marsden, the owner of the Pineapple Saloon and Grill in Sherman Oaks, did a video, put her video out there, a video of her looking at her outdoor dining setup, right? And what's underneath her outdoor dining setup? Well, a nice big tent with tables underneath. And she can't have it. That's been banned. No more outdoor dining. Okay, fair enough. But across the parking lot, 100 feet away, same tent, bigger, the tables underneath. Looked the same to me, thought it was like, woo. And that was allowed. Why? Because that was a dining set for a movie production, a film production. And she does a video and goes, how can this be? How can you have both? How come I'm shut down and you're not? Well, because there's an exception for movie and media production and music production in LA. So toss your science out the window, guys. There's no exception for media and movie production. And I've had people say to me, no, we're so good on our sets. Then, you know what? Have the same protocol everywhere. You don't have that protocol in Target. You don't go into Target and have the same protocol. I get that movie sets, they came up with a whole thing. They even have people who are designed to be the COVID advisors. I know some like to watch, make sure it's all done right. You could do that everywhere. And you could certainly say that if you're not doing that, if that's why movie sets are safe, then that's why Target is dangerous. Why are big box retailers safe, but small mom and pop shops aren't? It's ridiculous. You can stand in line at the grocery store in LA, you got a ton of people. You go into the box stores, you go into the Targets, the Kmart's, there's tons of people. You're not having to do, temperature checks or hand sanitizer. You just go in, touch things, shop, walk around. Yeah, you got a mask on. Great. So if it is so safe to do movie sets because they have such strict protocol, then that should be the standard for anything being open. Grocery store, Kmart, or a restaurant. Because if that's what it takes, then it should be everywhere. The reality is, the hardcore true reality is, the movie, entertainment, film industry in LA has enormous power, enormous influence, enormous wealth. They make lots of contributions. They pull lots of strings. And they said, Eric Garcetti, you are not shutting us down any longer. And Eric Garcetti said, yes, sir. That's the real world, guys. But that said, her outdoor dining and their outdoor dining were the same. Why was theirs shut down? And as a double, and what I love about her point, two quick things on this. One, NBC covered the story, and this really pissed me off. They left out the part of her comparing the two things and just showed her complaining about being shut down. Why did they leave it out? Since the whole point was, why is one okay, the other not? And it just happened to be a set for one of their sitcoms. Interesting. Their show, their sitcom, they cover it. Don't mention that it's theirs, and don't even mention that she's pointing that out. Again, what are you hiding? If you're doing nothing wrong, just put it out there, cover the story. And then when they come after you, say, yeah, we have no problem with it. We're following the protocols. We didn't get any special exceptions. We do extra protocols. Great. Then I'm any other business out there. I want those same protocols in place and then open me up. They're not going to do it. But Marsden's call to action was more than just, hey, why is this isn't fair? And this is where I want to go with this. The side of why we have hidden is how damaging this is becoming to people. We keep saying a business isn't a life. A business isn't a life. A business is not a life. But forcing entire forcing people to lose their livelihood, to watch their businesses wither away, to stay home, keep your kids home, not let them have social interaction, keep everything shut down, does cost lives. And what Angela Marsden pointed out was 3 of her employees know people who've committed suicide in the last 2 months. 1 of her employees is sleeping on a couch. Another has a 3-year-old and can't pay rent. She spent 2 years, 2 weeks training her and had to refire her right away. Real people will die, will suffer, will go hungry from not being able to live and interact and work. And that is not an either or. That is a real cost, as valid and real, and perhaps larger than the 200,000 people who've died of COVID. That is millions of lives and thousands of deaths, ultimately. That is real poverty. That is real pain. That is real suffering. And that is real death. So I'm not saying it's one or the other. I'm saying don't dismiss everybody who says, hey, come on, we need to be able to get on with our lives, as if they just want to go on a joyride party to Mexico for spring break. It's people wanting to be able to survive mentally, physically, financially, and destroying all that is a cost we can choose to make to protect the vulnerable. But let's not pretend it's just some insignificant cost like, hey, guys, get over it. Take one for the team, because it's way worse than that. And we have minimized the real cost of that. Now, watch. You're going to see Joe Biden's president. You're going to start seeing more coverage of that. You're going to start seeing the coverage of how damaging the pandemic is to people in suicide, hunger, loss. We're going to start seeing the human side of this stuff. Tyler, we should give them financial assistance. 150% we should. But that's part of the argument. And this isn't Republicans or Democrats, because both sides have been, I don't want to use the word, about this. And I'm sick of the politics for both of them. Nancy Pelosi says, no, it's not enough. I don't care if it's not enough. Give it to them. Start there. We'll get more later. Mitch McConnell says, no, it's too much. Both of you go jump in a COVID bat. I'm serious. Like, the infighting, the partisan infighting on both sides of this in Congress is disgusting. Get it done. Get it done. Get it done. Get it done halfway and then add another half later. But do it, or get out of office, because you're all living fine. You're getting your salaries. You've got your health insurance. You've got all the protections you need, all the protections you want. You have access to the best health care, and you live your lives just fine, while millions of Americans are suffering. So get it done. Yeah, Tyler, there should be financial assistance, but don't anybody say it's the Republicans' fault or it's the Democrats' fault. It's both of their faults. This is the one place your partisanship should be, put in a box and locked. And they're not doing it either side. I am not a scientist, but I will say this, and I don't know if you're asking that question because Amiala, I hope I said that right, Amiali. I don't think you need to be a scientist to look at scientific facts and data and make your own conclusions. I'm not saying I can do the data. I'm not saying I can do the analysis, but I can look at the analysis and I can look at the scientists and I can look at the scientists who did the analysis and I can look at other scientists and their analysis. And this notion, again, that you'd have to be a scientist to know, you don't. You maybe need to ask a scientist. I can line up a panel of respected doctors who will tell you that COVID will not, that the number of kids under 20 it harms is statistically insignificant, like 0.0001%. You're just about as likely to die of getting hit by lightning. They're respected doctors. Now, they're not going to necessarily come on my show and say it because the institutional mindset is you can't say that. But I can line up scientists to say all kinds of things, and it doesn't mean they're all right. I'm just saying there's different viewpoints on just about every aspect of science. Like, short of is the world round or flat? I think on that one, it's kind of, there's no one out there scientifically arguing it's flat. There's a lot of dispute within science of what works, what doesn't. There's no scientific thing that COVID's fake, but that lockdowns do or don't work. That there's an effectiveness or not an effectiveness based around, the approach we're taking, the effectiveness of masks. I think it's crazy to say masks don't work, but the reality is they're not a hazmat suit like some people think. They work to block spit coming out. And we know, and the media doesn't cover it, that bandanas actually spread it faster. It breaks the particles up, and those neck gaiters, which a lot of people wear. But of course, a mask works. The better the mask, the better it works. But at some level, there's debate about how effective certain things are, how effective certain techniques are. And certainly there's a valid scientific argument about whether or not the cost you are creating in destroying. I mean, we are literally in parts of this country, we are destroying the economy to the point it may never bounce back. And you're seeing in California, people are finally at a breaking point and going, we can't take this anymore. You gotta let us try to get on with our lives. Monkey Arms, I agree. Scientific debates about this instead of political panels. And I think that's probably true. I think the problem is, the challenge on that, Monkey Arms, really is, it's kind of interesting. Scientists kind of often don't like to debate. I have a friend who just got a show on Amazon called Proof, and it's about paranormal stuff. And the original concept he had was to have different people with different views about paranormal kind of go at it with each other, and they didn't want to go at it with each other. So they had to interview them all separately and had their own things. I think often scientists don't want to debate. They want to, because I think they recognize they have their science and others have their science or their view on that science. And they each kind of look at their own thing, and they're not necessarily good at debating. But that said, Monkey Arms, I'm 100% for. I say a great idea. I'm actually going to see if I could get a couple doctors or a couple scientists on who would have both sides on this and have that discussion, not as a debate, but as a genuine discussion. That's a really great idea. Tyler, wrong on this one, my friend. One side did not say it was a hoax. Some people on one side said it was a hoax. One side didn't. Most people on the right don't think COVID is a hoax. That's fake news, Tyler. Some people said it was a hoax, a tiny number, and they got a lot of press. The left, and there's people on the left I've heard who said it was a hoax, for that matter. The reality is, one side, and I don't know how this got political other than the Donald Trump, and I will say this about Donald Trump. He's the divider in chief, and he managed, granted, I pick on the other side for literally picking on him for everything, but he managed to make COVID divisive. One side tended to think that the way of handling it was extreme, that lockdowns were too intrusive, that they were too arbitrary, and that they weren't effective enough. And the other side argued, no, it was necessary and essential. I'm not going to dig into all that today. I've done it before. Like I said, I say, look at your leadership on that. The fact that pretty much all these, just about every single big city mayor, so many governors on the side, Tyler, you would say the left, who set these more draconian measures up, violated them themselves, should tell you something. But that alone, neither here nor there. One side didn't say it was a hoax. One side didn't like the degree to which, and that's not all people on the right. It's people who distrust government authorities' overreach. And the reality is, in the beginning, everybody bought in because you had to. It made sense. But at this point, it's fair to start looking at whether or not the cure has become worse than the virus, and we've minimized that. So all I would say is, why are we hiding from it? Let's put the numbers out there. All you for science, let's throw the data out. Let's show how many lives are being destroyed. Let's show how much poverty there's. Let's show the rates of suicide. You can find them, but the media doesn't blast them at you. Let's show the real cost of the pandemic, and then look at it and have a real fair look and say, is there a better way? It's a fair thing to ask. Okay, moving on. Jim Stock, when the left realized COVID was their golden ticket to the White House, it became 100% political. I think it became 100% political before that, in fairness. And I do think the left I think Democrats did realize that COVID would get them elected. And I think, again, it's naive to not think that. Both sides play politics, and I think there was no question that, I don't think the Democrats intended to keep COVID around longer, but I think they were well aware that COVID could help them get elected. I think they were well aware they could certainly push for, massive mail-in ballot voting without massive verification. And that's not a wrong thing to want. I mean, the verification. There's nothing wrong with saying, if we're going to do mail-in voting, let's force it to be verified. Some places you could sign, you didn't even have to have a matching signature. You just had to have your signature match the envelope. Didn't have to match the records on file. I mean, they knew that they'd get a whole lot more votes. I've always said this election wasn't rigged. They knew that if they had mass mail-in voting, they'd get more votes. There'd be more people who would send fraudulent votes. It would just work in their favor. It was just a reality. just an inevitable reality. A lot of people who don't vote, especially in big cities, a lot of people who are poor don't vote. Those people are more likely to just mail in a ballot. And, but again, this whole thing has been politicized. I've never seen a disease politicized. I know, Cruson, am I saying politicians are political? Gasp. I know. But you know what I'm saying about that, David, is that I know politicians are political. I don't like the fact that, one, we tend to look at politicians on our side as not political and on your side as political, whichever side you're on. My politicians aren't political, yours are. It's like they all are. And you have to kind of look at them all in that same petri dish. Now, it doesn't mean you can't like some of them more and like some of them less. You can hate Nancy Pelosi, you can hate Donald Trump, you can hate Mitch McConnell, but I throw them all pretty much in one boat and say, and by the way, Donald Trump doesn't get to do the I'm not a politician thing anymore. He wasn't a politician, but he played like a politician, and he did some of the things that politicians do, the worst things that politicians do. Donald Trump did some of the very worst things that politicians do. He played that game perfectly. He was self-absorbed, did what was best for him, did what he wanted, kind of railroaded things, tended to look always at his self-interest and his party's self-interest. He did other things I think were good, but nonetheless, he did a lot of the things that I dislike most about politicians. But yes, politicians are political, and we should look at that and be aware of that on both sides. I think the left did know that Trump would fumble the ball on COVID. I think you're right about that, Tyler. And I've said from the beginning, Trump did fumble the ball, but not for the reasons I think you think. I don't think Trump fumbled the ball in terms of how he handled the pandemic. I will go to the mat saying, I don't care who was president. They would not have known what to do when this got started, and there were no good choices. And I simply take you back to a week before Trump started moving to close things down. A week before, Dr. Anthony Fauci is on Good Morning America saying, no need to stop what you're doing. Live life as normal. A week later, they shut everything down. So anybody who goes, Trump resisted and waited, Trump's top advisors, the guy the left and everybody adores is the best epidemiologist in the world. St. Fauci himself said, we're all fine. Go about your business. A week before we shut the effing country down. So the notion that some other president would have acted faster, you don't act fast. When you got a strange virus, you don't know the consequences. You're not sure how bad it is. You don't want to wreck the economy. I know people say Trump didn't want to wreck his economy. And I've always said, yeah, it was like my economy. But the truth is, it's everybody's economy. And when you shut that down, you destroy millions and millions of lives. And I don't think any president would have had an easy time with that choice. No one. It would have been tough from day one. And you're gambling with what you do, and you're getting lots of mixed feedback. And again, I want to point out, Fauci and the COVID task force all said, and you can read the interviews, when we ended and told Trump what to do, he did it. Now, I wish he'd handled it different publicly. He fumbled the ball because he had no idea how to really show empathy and show concern. He was so concerned with let's pretend this isn't there and move on instead of going, this is there. We're going to figure out how to move on, but let's deal with this disease too. He couldn't do that. He failed. He dropped the ball. He fumbled 100%. I'm not giving huge props to the left for how they handled it either. They politicized it too. Okay, police in LA. Moving on. Police in LA. So a proposal being put out there by a council member, I believe it is, I could be wrong, is to, in Los Angeles, is to perhaps require police officers to be a minimum of 25 years old and to have a bachelor's degree in order to be a police recruit. Robert Relaford, this is a leadership issue, not a political one, and both leadership and bad leadership and bad results. Now that we have new leadership, let's come together as one country and solve this issue. You know what, Robert Relaford, the problem with that is, and you are unfortunately going to run into massive resistance because, the notion that on the left you go, now that we have good leadership, first of all, that's a huge, huge leap. I mean, please. Don't tell me Joe Biden is good leadership. Based on what? You can tell me we have new leadership. You can tell me you have leadership you like better because you'd elect a rock over Donald Trump. But don't tell me Joe Biden is good leadership. Show me one thing Joe Biden's done in his career that demonstrates good leadership. In fact, Wasn't that long ago, all you on the left, especially progressives, would have been dumping on Joe Biden for horrible leadership, because his number one, most successful, most touted, most visible leadership was the 1994 crime bill. That and what he did to Anita Hill in the Justice Clarence Thomas hearings, where he threw her under the bus, made the victim, whether she was or wasn't, I don't know, no one but they may know what really happened, but literally made her, for daring to say she was sexually harassed, made her the bad person. That's what Joe Biden's most known for. And that and being Obama's vice president, which he did nothing. Not Obama, Biden. So he's not good leadership. And asking everyone to unify, well, good luck with that, because you're not going to get a bunch of people to unify after you. And this takes me to Matthew McConaughey. Matthew McConaughey put it really well, for which he's being canceled. Why was Matthew McConaughey canceled? Because he was on with Russell Brand. And they were talking about how Russell Brand saying he's sort of annoyed by how Hollywood elites tend to just throw half the country under the bus as a bunch of idiot morons. And Matthew McConaughey said, you know what? It's true. I mean, I see it around me all the time. Everybody treats like this entire half of the country as if they're a bunch of idiots. And he's like, I find it arrogant and condescending and out of touch. And, you know, and he went on, and Russell Brand, and he agreed that, like, why is this elitism of like dismissing half the country as if you're all a bunch of wackos? And they're not all a bunch of wackos. I'd be one of those wackos, I guess, by that logic. I'm not a wacko. I know a whole lot of people who are right of center, Trump supporters and non-Trump supporters, who are not Democrats or not on the left. And there's nothing wacko about them. They're thoughtful, intelligent, hardworking, honest, good people. They have their problems like everybody else. There's bad ones among them like everywhere else. They'd be your friends if we lived in a parallel universe with their same political views. Maybe we just need to check out the parallel universe of America. Matthew McConaughey says, you know, why do you expect people on the right to suddenly just accept this? Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't. I've said to all the people I know who are like living on the Trump conspiracy train that the election was stolen. It wasn't stolen. I told you, I think there was all kinds of flaws, and I think Democrats' leadership knew what mail-in balloting would do, and there certainly was fraud. How widespread, I don't know. How deep, more importantly, not deep enough. But this election wasn't stolen, and it wasn't rigged. It was messed up. That's different. But I'm not drinking the conspiracy Kool-Aid that it was stolen to say at the same time, 4 years ago when Trump won, everybody who was against Trump insisted it was rigged, it was unfair, it was illegal, whatever they threw out there. He corrupted, the Russians helped him do it, one thing after another. He was the illegitimate president. So people on the right understandably go, why do you expect us to suddenly just go, okay, let's jump together and unify? And that's all Matthew McConaughey said. He didn't say, I like Trump. He just said, I don't understand how people expect people on the right to not do the same thing, to not feel like, hey, you denied us being legitimate for 4 years. We're a little pissed. Don't ask us all just to suddenly be like, woohoo. And for that, he got hammered. He got canceled up the butt. It's hard to cancel Matthew McConaughey, but they tried. I met Matthew McConaughey years ago. He was just breaking in. He was doing a movie with Sandra Bullock that she was producing. Ex-girlfriend of mine is the sort of the star, but it was a small independent film at Sundance. A really cool film. Clark Gregg was in it. It's interesting. They're all like rocketed up to the top. Clark on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Matthew. Yeah, Sandra was already well known. Good guy. I didn't know him well, but a good guy. But again, you know, not somebody who's ever been considered thoughtless or a jerk, or, you know, when you look at celebs for what you can know about them and what people who know them can know about them, you know, like just a thoughtful, smart guy. Watch him in interviews. Like, he's not a kook. And all he said was, you know what? It's stop making half the country out to be a bunch of imbecilic morons. They're not. They're your neighbors, basically. And stop expecting everyone to just suddenly be okay when you weren't okay for 4 years. That's all he said. And for that, he got blasted to shreds. Okay, for Wait on the Leash, I can't read it. For Wait on Bleach.
For Walton Bleach.
Doesn't exist. They are not my friends. Well, okay, and I'm not saying they should be your friends. And again, I don't know what coworkers you have, but again, tell your coworkers to watch my show because I guess I'm a little center right. I suppose that's what people say. I think I'm really right in the middle or independent, but either way, because I go pretty left on some things because I'm actually in favor of like redistribution of wealth and all kinds of things, which, no one on the right would be in favor of, you know, and I'm pro-choice, not pro-abortion, but pro-choice, but, and, an anti-death penalty. I'm all kinds of things. But in any case, have them watch my show because, again, the pandemic is real. That doesn't mean how we're dealing with it is the most effective way. Those are two separate issues. The pandemic is very real. And I actually don't know anybody who thinks it's not. I've heard some people who try to minimize it a little, say it's just like a bad flu. I'm like, it's not just like a bad flu. It's like a bad flu with no vaccine. And by the way, if we didn't have a vaccine for the flu, a couple of years ago, 60,000 Americans died of the flu in 1 year. It just didn't get a lot of press coverage. 60,000 people, like 2018, died of the flu in the US. So if we didn't have a vaccine for the flu would be really bad. We have a lot more deaths. And unlike COVID, the flu affects young people as well. It is weird that way. But yeah, the pandemic's real. I agree that the cancel culture has no nuance, and that's part of the challenge. There's no nuance to it. There's no going, you know what? All right. And look at this, like Olivia Jade, right? Olivia Laughlin, Olivia Jade Laughlin, Lori Laughlin's daughter, the actress who went to prison for 2 months for the cheating scandal. Remember that back then? Remember that? So, it came out and went on Jada Pinkett Smith, talk show Red Table and talked about it for the first time. And this is the 21-year-old daughter. And, it's interesting. She said, hey, we screwed up big time. We screwed up big time, really big time. Okay, I get it. And I get why people were, down on us for doing that. We made a mistake, but don't we get a second chance? I thought interesting. You want a second chance. Okay. Well, so does everybody else who gets canceled. You're getting canceled, girl. You're getting canceled. And by the way, do you deserve a second chance? Yeah, but you didn't even handle yourself well through the first chance, right? Because when this all happened, you didn't just go, oh my God, we screwed up. You kept just, doing your thing, doing your Instagram posts, being out there, being all hip, fine, and whatever, none of them seemed to take it seriously as if like they weren't really going to get punished. And again, I don't know, the school cheating thing seems like nothing right now. But the fact is, she's now going, why don't I get a second chance? Well, that's the problem with cancel culture. It doesn't give people a second chance. There's no nuance. You're done. You're canceled. You said the wrong thing. Take it back. And don't just take it back. Take it back and say, you should never have thought it or said it in the first place. And you're ashamed that you didn't know better than to think or say what you said. And you'll try to correct your thinking. It's like mind washing. Cancel culture doesn't just tell you to be quiet. It tells you to go back, understand the errors of your way, apologize for the fact that you ever thought the things you thought, and agree to make steps to clean your thinking up, to correct your mindset. It's dangerous. There is no nuance in cancel culture. I think it's true that most actors who support Trump get shut down. Matthew McConaughey wasn't supporting Trump. He was simply saying, I understand why people on the right aren't going to just take this so easily. And by the way, saying, stop making, look, I come from Hollywood. I've been around a lot of Hollywood elites. Matthew McConaughey is a Hollywood elite. So is Russell Brand. They're telling you, I'm telling you, the attitude of most Hollywood elites is really out of touch. It is like half the country is a bunch of idiotic morons. And and they should all just deal with stuff differently. They're two separate things. One's they're a bunch of idiotic morons, because they don't agree with me. And two, I tell you, if you look at how out of touch these people are, just completely out of touch they are with reality. I've talked about it before. Kim Kardashian going on her trip and posting going, see, God, we're finally free to go. Celebrities going, it's been really hard being in lockdown in my mansion with my pool and all my staff and my personal trainers and everything I want and need and tons of money in the bank. They're out of touch. That's not a person on the right saying it. People on the left know it. The irony is Bernie Sanders and people on the right have a lot more in common than you think in a certain way. for the record, I voted for Bernie. You say I'm center right. I don't know. I voted for Bernie in primaries. Didn't make it to the big dance. All right, wrapping it up, nearing the end here. Let me just pick up on this police thing. I disagree, Monkey Arms. There's not plenty of folks not getting canceled. There's plenty of folks not getting canceled to keep their mouth shut. The reality is, there's a high school teacher who got fired because she posted, one of her posts was, "This is a potato, this is Joe Biden. I will vote for the potato over Joe Biden." And she posted it on her private Facebook. And they fired her for being a racist. And you have a free speech right. It's a pretty wide, pretty extreme right to say what you want on your private social media. You can cross that line, but she didn't. And they fired her. They fired her butt, and then they said she resigned. Now she's suing, and she'll win. But she got canceled for merely having a political opinion, not an offensive one, just a one. So I disagree that I think lots of people are getting canceled, and there's a lot of people afraid to even say, I have people afraid to come on my show as a guest, just a call in, because they're afraid they'll get fired. They're afraid they'll get blasted. They're afraid they'll get beat up if they don't say the right thing. So I think the canceling goes a lot deeper than you think. And if you look, you'll see that. To this police thing, William Bowling's, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines. Emerson, wow, we're going Emerson here. I haven't read Emerson in a long time. Ralph Waldo Emerson. I liked Emerson. That's a beautiful line. And it's a complex one. Everyone's going, what the heck did that mean? Read Emerson. It's good for the soul. It's good for the soul. Freedom of speech isn't freedom from consequences. You got it wrong there, Monkey Arms. That is true. That is true. I've said that about Colin Kaepernick. I said Colin Kaepernick was bold and gutsy to take a knee, but he paid a consequence, which the NFL and his team had every right to do. They didn't have to keep him on. They're a private company, any more than Twitter can censor you. I said Twitter can censor you. I don't like the fact that we don't have regulation on these massive platforms, but they're a private company. So that does have consequences. And let me tell you, Colin Kaepernick paid the consequences out of control, because when people say he didn't get rehired because he wasn't good enough, I mean, if you're a football fan, have you watched this season? I mean, have you looked? Right? I mean, you had a team that took a player. It took a player off, not off the second string, the third string. They took a player off the practice squad who was a wide receiver on the practice squad. You don't even play, and made him starting quarterback. Man, wouldn't you just think, bring Colin Kaepernick in for a minute? Let's give it a shot. I mean, he's at least gone to the playoffs. Yes, freedom of speech has consequences, but those consequences, and that's the whole point of freedom of speech, Monkey Arms, that I think you're missing. Those consequences, yes, but the consequences are not that you can just get fired automatically from a position to say in the public sector because you've spoken something that someone doesn't like. Part of the protection of freedom of speech is that you can't punish a person merely for exercising their freedom of speech. Now, that doesn't mean a private company can't do what it wants to do. I will acknowledge that. I just did, whether, Colin Kaepernick or Twitter. But to notion that, that somehow cancel culture makes sense because freedom of speech has consequences. Well, wait till that gets you. Wait till you're getting censored for saying things. Because again, cancel culture will eventually come around and get us all. All right, running out of time here, guys. Want to just touch on this thing. Thanks, Monkey Arms. That Tyler actually suggested this to me in a message, that I look at this police thing in LA and don't have excuse me, sorry about coughing. It's not COVID, I promise. I'm COVID free. Would it make a difference if police in LA had to be bachelor's degrees and 25 years old? I thought it was interesting. The 25 years is you've had more life experience, more maturity. And the implication was, they said, we don't want to just put the guy proposed the bill. We don't want to just put, anyone on the force. And it's sort of like, okay, a little anyone thing. It's sort of the notion. Suddenly hit me the elitist, anti-elitist part of me is like, so what you're saying is if you've gone to college, you're somehow better able to be a police officer than if you haven't. I don't like that at core level. It's this notion of going to college somehow is such the best thing in the world for you. Again, that's that elitist notion. Why? Most people going to college, it's just a chance to party, and you get a degree, you can spend a lot of money, and you're not actually more employable than someone who didn't go to college. In fact, less employable than somebody who actually worked or had experience or apprenticed their way up. That would be more valuable. Yet we tell you, go to college, invest, get the loans, and then you can wait in line for a job. But would a cop be less likely to shoot someone because they went to college? And because they're 25. And it's a really, really, really interesting question. Are we recruiting cops in and not making sure they have certain qualifications? And I don't, when I say qualifications, I mean certain things around them that would ensure they are more likely. Some kids here in Jacksonville had an idea that they think that police recruits should have to have a minimum amount of community service, that they work in impoverished or underserved communities that they will most likely serve in, and have to put a certain number of hours in there to get to know the community. Would that make you likely to treat that community differently? Would making you be slightly older make you more mature? Would having a bachelor's degree, laugh at that one. You go to college, you'll make a good cop. I don't know, but I laugh at it, but would you be less likely to shoot someone? But the point is to open our minds up that there may be other ways we could be looking at police reform. We've talked about a culture in policing that most police departments will acknowledge. There's a certain kind of culture, and part of it's changing the culture. I had District Attorney, Gascon, the new District Attorney in LA, on my show, and he talked about, the need to have, and he was a former police chief in San Francisco and the assistant chief in LA under Bratton. And he said part of it's leadership, comes from the leadership down. So how do you create and direct a different kind of leadership? How do you create a different culture? Is that making people older, giving them bachelor's degrees? Or is there something else that's less sort of a systematic requirement, something you could work on people with? But we're not thinking. We need some green light thinking. It's not either, defund the police or keep them the way they are. We're so binary. We're just so binary. What education requirements are required of nurses who have to deal with the aftermath of police decisions? Well, again, I am not defending the way police behave. I have pointed out on this show before that, before we again make it all binary, I've had a number of police officers who are anti-Trump, for the record, often Black, for the record, and acknowledge there's racism in policing and that they've been victims of racism in their life, who've looked at a number of the high-profile shootings, not all of them, and some of them, and said, any cop would have done the same thing. It's how we're trained, and it was what we would do. I think people tend to forget, like the knife wielding ones are good examples. Most cops will tell you, somebody comes at you with a knife, you're going to shoot them. Now, people can go, you shouldn't, but it's human nature. Now, they're like, I didn't sign up to die today. So it's easy to say that. And I'd ask most of you, somebody coming at you with a knife and you have a gun, are you going to shoot him? I asked the guy that in our town hall, a Black Lives Matter activist, and finally he admitted, he's like, to be honest, yes, I would shoot you. It's my, again, so it's not binary. But that said, I acknowledge that we've got a lot of work to do in almost every major city police department to improve policing and to improve the way police operate and to make, I've argued for years that I think police wield this incredible power. I've got a badge and a gun, do what I say. I hate authority. I've run up against them and been like, don't tell me what. I had a cop point a gun in my head, literally, and yell at me to put my hands up. I'd done nothing wrong, but the bar behind me, something had happened. And I wouldn't. I was like, put the gun down. I'll put my hands up. He's like, I said, put your hands up. I'm like, put the gun down. I see his hand shaking on the gun. My buddy behind me, who's a doctor at the time, he's like, put your hands up. I'm like, put the gun down. It's like, don't point a gun in my face. I've done nothing wrong. I get that they have a gun and a badge. They expect you to do what they say. I'm not for that. I think they often abuse their authority, period. And we have to fix that. My question is how? Yeah, it would be, Tyler. That's a great point. Would be interesting, since we're going to talk about the science. They look at the data. You're right. Our police shootings. That's a great, I wonder if anybody's really done that, Tyler. Looked at the data on police shootings and tried to see a correlation between who, not just what race they are, what the level of education backgrounds of people who've been involved in a lot of shootings. Now, again, unjustifiable shootings, right? Because if any of you watch my show, you've seen I've had homicide cops on, and they're all usually involved in a lot of shootings. I've had pastors on who were former cops who were involved in shootings. Like, if you're a homicide cop, I'm sorry, not a homicide cop, a narcotics cop. If you're a narcotics cop, you are probably everyone, the joke is everyone you deal with has a gun. Like, you can't shoot everybody because everybody's got a gun when you're a narcotics cop. Everyone you're working with's got a gun somewhere. Everyone on the narcotics side, not the cop side. They have guns too, of course. So, but it would be interesting to see, how does it correlate? How does it match up? And again, my point is, let's start looking for less binary solutions, all or nothing. Let's start looking in the green light thinking, and how we know there's a problem. I had the head of the police union at my town hall here in Jacksonville that I hosted. And he acknowledged, there's things we need to do differently. We're not doing it all right by any means. But finding what that is not just an easy solution. So how do we figure out what does that look like to actually improve policing? And it's not just take all the money away and throw it at community organizers to do community policing. I'm sorry, not going to work. Watch what happens in places they do that. You're going to see crime going up. And by the way, all the politicians who want to defund the police and all that, you know what? They got private security. They got protection around them. They'll call the cops when they need it. So again, be careful you jump on that bandwagon, because they're going to make sure they're taken care of. But that's not to say we just do things the way they are. We've got to make real changes. You know what, Tyler? It might require more transparency, but maybe that right there is one step most police departments need to move toward. And that is something you could force: a greater degree of transparency, period, in you are public servants, who's being hired, what their records are, made more public earlier on. I'm not in favor necessarily that that there's some part, that they get less immunity. There's this whole partial immunity thing. I'm not necessarily sure that you want to be able to sue the individual officers. Don't know. But more transparency, 100% period, would make sense. All right, you guys, I'm way over time. I was going to keep today short. I don't know what happened. I got long and went crazy. It's been an awesome show. Thank you all for watching. Crafty, you want to come up for a second? We got to go, dude. I didn't realize what time it is. I've been on a roll. Crafty, good to see you. I had to bring you up because you look like the man. You look like the Wizard of Oz back there. Look at you. You literally like you know what you're like? You're like the piano, like the modern version of the piano player in Phantom of the Opera. Crafty. Yeah.
Or the
maestro.
Yeah.
He is the maestro behind the scenes. What an awesome, fun show. Went really fast. Love all the feedback. Love all the input. Really appreciate all you guys. Seriously, share this. Follow. I know some of you get frustrated at things I say. Some of you like what I say. Some of you wish I would say less or more than you want to hear. But I appreciate it. Whoops. I just did something to my screen. I appreciate it very much. Crafty for president. There we go, Crafty. You got your first nomination. I appreciate you guys. I really do. And for me, again, anybody who knows me knows I'm not trying to pick a side. Maybe I should. I honestly am trying to find common ground and this doesn't mean I don't see we all have sides on certain things, but I really am trying to find a way to find some common ground so we can move forward, because I think it's the only way. I'll keep saying it. I don't think we move forward if we just stay in our sides. We'll just keep going back and forth like this. And that ain't going to get, for most people who actually, elites aside, elites can handle the ping pong. For most people, I did that ping pong. For most people, especially the people, if you care about the people who are the most underserved, they get screwed the most by the ping ponging. They actually would benefit more from the common ground. I'm Rob Nelson. Thanks for watching.